all for coming. We're still getting some of the details set up. We're gonna get some last minute instruments set up, but I wanted to take a second and welcome all of you and thank you all for coming out in kind of the precarious weather we've been having. I appreciate all of you taking the time and effort to brave the ice and make it here today. For those of you who I don't know, my name is Uma Doshi and I'm going to be your MC for this program today. We have a nice short program for you. It should take us about an hour and a half to 2 hours, and we have some really great acts lined up, so I request that all of you stay for the whole performance and see what everyone has put together for you today. We have different songs and dances and presentations from all different parts of India, and it's a great mix of things that people have put together for you, especially for today. We're going to take a couple minutes to just get our last technical bits set up, and as soon as we're ready to go and everyone is ready in here, we'll get our program started. So thank you for your patience.
Check. This is not part of the lineup. We are just waiting for the tabla player. We'll sing one bhajan. We finished Shivratri last week. It's on Lord Shiva. जय शिव शंकर जय गंगाधर करुणा कर करतार हरे
जय शिव शंकर जय गंगाधर
करुणा कर करतार हरे जय कैलाशी जय अविनाशी सुख राशि सुखकार हरे जय शिव शंकर जय गंगाधर
जय शशि शेखर जय डमरूधर जय जय प्रेमा गान हरे
जय शशि शेखर जय डमरूधर जय जय प्रेमा गान हरे जय त्रिपुरारी जय मदहारी अमित अनंत अपार हरे जय शिव शंकर जय गंगाधर करुणा कर करतार हरे जय शिव शंकर जय गंगाधर जय रामेश्वर जय नागेश्वर वैद्यनाथ केदार हरे
जय रामेश्वर जय नागेश्वर वैद्यनाथ केदार हरे
काशीपति श्री विश्वनाथ है विश्वंभर अविकार हरे जय शंकर जय गंगाधर करुणा कर करतार हरे जय कैलाशी जय अविनाशी सुख राशि सुखकार हरे जय शिव शंकर जय शिव शंकर जय शिव शंकर.
All right. So, first of all, give another huge round of applause to Anant and Shruti for putting together something on the fly and helping us while we were getting everything set up. Like I mentioned, my name is Uma and I'm going to be your MC for this program today, just helping take you through it. I also want to introduce a close friend of mine, Aishwarya Vardhana, who unfortunately was supposed to be here today, but with all the weather, her flight got canceled, so she will be joining us by Zoom today very nicely to help take us through all the stories that we will be telling you today. She will be putting together a set of poems throughout the entire performances today that will put together what we are going to be calling a razai, or an art quilt. And so it took a lot of dedication to still be here for the whole event, even though she couldn't make it in person, and she put a lot of effort in today. So huge round of applause for her as well. So now we're going to get started with the first program as they continue to tune their instruments. We're going to inaugurate this poem with a Meera Bhajan. The original composer of this bhajan was Nusrat Fateh Ali Khan. However, it has been popularized and immortalized by the famous Srimati Pooja Gaitonde. And the version that will be performed today is that version. There are a multitude of people who came together to put this together. The lead singer for this today is going to be Mini Jairaj, accompanied by a chorus of Anant Jagirdar, Shruti Jagirdar, Giru Shriram, Prabhajot Kaur-Jyoti, Anjana Manjari, Archana Tampi, Tavni Cheda, Swarupa Pravakar, Shweta Deshmukh, Sanson Malagi, and Anant Vardhana. Then we have a bunch of instrumentals today as well, so please give a round of applause to Shri Gangnarayam Purva Late Jain on the tabla, as well as Avigan Gargeshwari on the keyboard, and Anant Namboothri on the saxophone. And Krishna Kurubat on the dholak. Sorry. All right, so I'm going to turn it over to Mini Auntie, and then we are going to get you guys started with our Meera Bhajan today. But first, we'll hear a little bit from Aishwarya about this new event.
Test, test. Test, test.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Hello, hello.
I call her Mother India, but all my aunties are in Oregon. I speak Kannada. Nanige Shuddha Kannada bರ್ತದೆ, but I wrote this poem in English. My parents left Dakshina Kannada's ancient, sacred warmth and muggy green for the land of Christmas trees. Oh Krishna, oh Govinda, can you still understand me if I sing in English? Can you hear us if we sing from America?
मैं पलक ढांप तो हेलूं आ पिया 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 इन नैनन में मैं पलक ढांप तो हेलूं ना मैं देखूं गेर को ना मैं तो ही देखन लूं अब किस्मत के हाथ है इस बंधन की लाज मैंने तो मन लिख दिया सांवरिया के नाम जब से राधा शाम के नैन हुए हैं चार शाम बने हैं राधिका राधा बन गई शाम अरे सांसों की माला पे सांसों की माला पे सांसों की माला पे सिमरूं मैं पीतारा सांसों की माला पे सिमरूं मैं पीतारा सांसों की माला पे सिमरूं मैं पीतारा अपनी मन की मैं जानूं और पीछे मन की राह सांसों की माला पे सिमरूं मैं पीतारा सांसों की माला पे सिमरूं मैं पीतारा यही मेरी बंदगी है यही मेरी पूजा और मैं सांसों की माला में सिमरूं मैं पीतारा सांसों की
job from such a great group of people. Thank you all so much for all the time and effort you put into that performance. Next up, we're gonna head to south and look at dance form in India. And we will be looking at a Kuchipudi dance. This dance will be called Sthree, Shakti, Satya, which essentially translates to an Indian form of girl power. So it will be a dance focused on the strength of women. This will be a dance choreographed by Srimati Anuradha Ganesh and the Natna Kuchipudi School of Dance. As we get set up for our next performance, I'm going to turn it over to Aishwarya again for another poem.
Kuchipudi. Down. Tak-tak-tak. Tak-tak-tak. Down. Tak-tak-tak. Tak-tak-tak. I sat in the back of Amma's black Toyota Camry years before it was totaled. I felt slightly nauseous as she accelerated down turns from Forest Heights. It was Sunday in 2003, and my afternoon was packed. Music class at Shailanti's, followed by dance at Radhikanti's. I did not know how to read time, but I could sing, and I could dance. Takita jumta jumta jumta, da jumta.
Check. Mic check. Sthree Shakti Satya, Sthree Shakti Nitya, Sthree Shakti Satya, Sthree Shakti Nitya. Sthree Shakti Satya, Sthree Shakti Nitya, Sthree Shakti Satya, Sthree Shakti Nitya. ಎಲ್ಲರೂ ಮಲಗಿರಲು ಅವಳೊಬ್ಬಳೆದ್ದಳು, ಸಂಯಮದ ಸುಕೃತಿಯ ಸ್ತ್ರೀಯೊಬ್ಬಳೆದ್ದಳು. ಎಲ್ಲರೂ ಮಲಗಿರಲು ಅವಳೊಬ್ಬಳೆದ್ದಳು, ಸಂಯಮದ ಸುಕೃತಿಯ ಸ್ತ್ರೀಯೊಬ್ಬಳೆದ್ದಳು. ಸ್ತ್ರೀ ಶಕ್ತಿ ಸತ್ಯ, ಸ್ತ್ರೀ ಶಕ್ತಿ ನಿತ್ಯ, ಸ್ತ್ರೀ ಶಕ್ತಿ ಸತ್ಯ, ಸ್ತ್ರೀ ಶಕ್ತಿ ನಿತ್ಯ. ಸ್ತ್ರೀ ಎಲ್ಲರೂ ಮತಿಗೆಟ್ಟು ದೂಷಿಸಲು ನಿನ್ನ ನಿರ್ವಿಕಾರದ ಚಿತ್ತದಿಂದಿರುವೆ ನೀನು. ಎಲ್ಲರೂ ಮತಿಗೆಟ್ಟು ದೂಷಿಸಲು ನಿನ್ನ ನಿರ್ವಿಕಾರದ ಚಿತ್ತದಿಂದಿರುವೆ ನೀನು. ಜಗವೆಲ್ಲ ಸಂಶಯಿಸಿ ನೋಡಲು ನಿನ್ನ ಸಂಶಯವ ಸಂಶಯಿಸ ನೀನು. ಅಚಲತೆಯ ಹಿಮಮಯ್ಯ ಪರ್ವತವು ನೀನೆ, ಧೈರ್ಯದ ಮೂರ್ತಿಯು ನೀನೆ. ಅಚಲತೆಯ ಹಿಮಮಯ್ಯ ಪರ್ವತವು ನೀನೆ, ಧೈರ್ಯದ ಮೂರ್ತಿಯು ನೀನೆ. ಶ್ರೀ ಶಕ್ತಿ ಸತ್ಯ, ಶ್ರೀ ಶಕ್ತಿ ನಿತ್ಯ, ಶ್ರೀ ಶಕ್ತಿ ಸತ್ಯ, ಶ್ರೀ ಶಕ್ತಿ ನಿತ್ಯ. ಶ್ರೀ ಶಕ್ತಿ ಸತ್ಯ, ಶ್ರೀ ಶಕ್ತಿ ನಿತ್ಯ, ಶ್ರೀ ಶಕ್ತಿ ಸತ್ಯ, ಶ್ರೀ ಶಕ್ತಿ ನಿತ್ಯ. ಎಂತಹ ಸುಳ್ಳನ್ನು ಸೈರಿಸುವೆ ನೀನು, ತಿರುಗಿಯುಸಿಯಲು ನೀನುಡಿರದಿಯೆಂದು. ದೂರಿ ಹಿಂಗಳೆದವರ ಮೀರಿ ನಿಲ್ಲವೆ ನೀನು, ಮೋಹಿಸುವೆ ದ್ವೇಷದಲ್ಲಿ ನಡೆಬಬರಲೆಂದು. ಕ್ರೌರ್ಯದ ವೈರದ ನಿಗ್ರಹಳು ನೀನೆ, ಪ್ರೀತಿಯ ಸ್ನೇಹದ ಆದರವು ನೀನೆ. ಕ್ರೌರ್ಯದ ವೈರದ ನಿಗ್ರಹಳು ನೀನೆ, ಪ್ರೀತಿಯ ಸ್ನೇಹದ ಆದರವು ನೀನೆ. ಶ್ರೀ ಶಕ್ತಿ ಸತ್ಯ, ಶ್ರೀ ಶಕ್ತಿ ನಿತ್ಯ, ಶ್ರೀ ಶಕ್ತಿ ಸತ್ಯ, ಶ್ರೀ ಶಕ್ತಿ ನಿತ್ಯ. ಶ್ರೀ ಶಕ್ತಿ ಸತ್ಯ, ಶ್ರೀ ಶಕ್ತಿ ನಿತ್ಯ, ಶ್ರೀ ಶಕ್ತಿ ಸತ್ಯ, ಶ್ರೀ ಶಕ್ತಿ ನಿತ್ಯ. ಜಲಯ ಮಾತೆಯು ನೀನು, ಜನಕನಾದ ಶರತನಾದರ್ಶ ನೀನು. ಸಾಸಿರ ರಾಮರನು ತೂಗುವೆ ನೀನು, ರಾಮನ ತೇಜದ ಪಂಚಾಂಗ ನೀನು. ಅಸುರರ ಅಸುರಿಯ ಧ್ವಂಸಗಳು ನೀನೆ, ಅಗ್ನಿಯ ಅವಗುಣವ ಮೀರಿರುವೆ ನೀನೆ. ಅಸುರರ ಅಸುರಿಯ ಧ್ವಂಸಗಳು ನೀನೆ, ಅಗ್ನಿಯ ಅವಗುಣವ ಮೀರಿರುವೆ ನೀನೆ. ಶ್ರೀ ಶಕ್ತಿ ಸತ್ಯ, ಶ್ರೀ ಶಕ್ತಿ ನಿತ್ಯ, ಶ್ರೀ ಶಕ್ತಿ ಸತ್ಯ, ಶ್ರೀ ಶಕ್ತಿ ನಿತ್ಯ. ಶ್ರೀ ಶಕ್ತಿ ಸತ್ಯ, ಶ್ರೀ ಶಕ್ತಿ ನಿತ್ಯ, ಶ್ರೀ ಶಕ್ತಿ ಸತ್ಯ, ಶ್ರೀ ಶಕ್ತಿ ನಿತ್ಯ.
All right, thank you so much to everyone. Again, a huge shout out to the singing group, which consisted of Shruti, Devi on Discar, tabla we had Srikant Nare, keyboard Abhigyan Kardeshwari, and Anant on the flute. And again, to thank her dancers, we have Srimati Anuradha Ganesh.
I am not Srimati Anuradha Ganesh, but I am one of the dancers now, Bhagyashree, and the dancers are Rhythm Com. So, Ishita Sane, Radha, Uma, Ashrika, Shaivi, Shivi, Meera, sorry, Suparnika, Shaivi, and Nehal.
Thank you all so much for the wonderful dance. We're going to keep it going with the dances, and this time we're going to venture into the form of Bharatanatyam. Our next dance will be presented by Srimati Shweta Ravishankar of the Sarada Kala Nilayam and her students, and I'm going to have her introduce her own dance.
Thank you so much. Hello everybody, my name is Shweta. Today I'll be presenting 3 dances in the dance form of Bharatanatyam along with my students. The dance school that I run is called Sharada Kala Nilayam. A little about the 3 dances. The first dance that we'll be doing is actually the first dance that the students learn after their fundamental steps, which is called Alaripu. Alaripu literally means budding of a flower, so you'll see a lot of movements which symbolize budding of a flower too. The second dance that we'll be presenting is on a lot of dances, Shiva. It is a Kautvam, which means that there'll be words describing Shiva. Shiva holding the moon, Shiva having the tiger skin attire, Shiva having the Ganges flowing from his head, and this will be interspersed by jatis or rhythmic syllables. The third dance is on Krishna, who plays the flute. It is a joyous dance of him playing the flute and dancing. So we'll have all the 3 dances one after the other. So here we go.
Bharatanatyam. The Natya Shastra is an ancient script that set the aesthetic underpinnings for every classical Indian art form we see today. Pataka, Tirupataka, Addapataka, Kattarimukaha. Natya Shastra says that the purpose of art is to elevate the audience's consciousness. When done correctly, art becomes ecstasy. I try to think of when I last felt ecstasy while watching Bharatanatyam. I recall countless barefoot evenings spent in community centers, random libraries, churches, and school gyms. Our mothers combing our hair and feeding us Costco snacks. I recalled mouthing the words as we danced to Tamil songs. None of us Tamil. I recall knowing we were Oregon's first Bharatanatyam dancers, but I could not recall ecstasy. I could only recall recovery and discovery.
Ada, ನಾದ ಮುರಳಿ ಗಾನ ವಿರೋಧ ನಾದ ಮುರಳಿ ಗಾನ ವಿರೋಧ ಕಲ್ಯಾಣ ಕೃಷ್ಣ 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 ನಾದ ಗಾನ ವಿರೋಧ ಕಲ್ಯಾಣ ಕೃಷ್ಣ ನಾರದ ಮುನಿಯನ್ನುತ ವರವಾಲ ಗೋಪಾಲ ನಾದ ಮುರಳಿ ಗಾನ ವಿರೋಧ ಕಲ್ಯಾಣ ಕೃಷ್ಣ ನಾರದ ಮುನಿಯನ್ನುತ ವರವಾಲ ಗೋಪಾಲ ನಾದ ಮುರಳಿ ಗಾನ ಮಾಧವ ಮಧುಸೂದನ ಹರಿ ಮುಕುಂದ ಮಾಧವ ಮಧುಸೂದನ ಹರಿ ಮುಕುಂದ ಮಂಗಲ ವರದಾಯಕ ಪ್ರಭು ಗಿರಿಧರ ಗೋಪಾಲ ಮಂಗಲ ವರದಾಯಕ ಪ್ರಭು ಗಿರಿಧರ ಗೋಪಾಲ ಹರಿತಕ ಧರಿತಕ ಜನುಗಾನ್ ತರ್ಕತೆ ದಾಲ್ಕ ಮಮ ಮಮ ಹರಿತ ಹರಿತಕ ಧರಿತಕ ಜನುಗಾನ್ ತರ್ಕತೆ ದಾಲ್ಕ ಮಮ ಮಮ ಹರಿತ ಹರಿತಕ ಧರಿತಕ ಜನುಗಾನ್ ತರ್ಕತೆ ಮಾಗ ಪಾಪ ಮಮ ಭಗವೀತ ಅತಿ ಸುಂದರ ಮನ್ಮಥ ರೂಪಿಣೆ ಮುಖವಂದರಾಜ ಗಿರಿಧಾರಿಣೆ ಅತಿ ಸುಂದರ ಮನ್ಮಥ ರೂಪಿಣೆ ಮುಖವಂದರಾಜ ಗಿರಿಧಾರಿಣೆ ಭುವಿಗಾರನೆ ಗಿರಿಧಾರನೆ ಭುವಿಗಾರನೆ ಗಿರಿಧಾರನೆ ತಕ್ಕ ದಿಂತ ದಿಂತ ತಕ್ಕ ದಿಂತ ದಿಂತ ತಕ್ಕ ತದಿಂಗಿನ ತಂಪ ತದಿಂಗಿನ ತಂಪ ತದಿಂಗಿನ ತಂಪ ಪಮರ ಮರಿ ದಿಂತ ದಿಂತ ತಕ್ಕ ದಿಂತ ದಿಂತ ತಕ್ಕ ತದಿಂಗಿನ ತಂಪ ತದಿಂಗಿನ ತಂಪ ತದಿಂಗಿನ ತಂಪ ಪಮರ ಮರಿ ಸಸ ಸಪ ಪದ ದ ಪ ಪ ಮ ಮ ಗ ಪ
All right, we appear to have lost our mic. It's fine, I'm loud. Can everyone hear me? Great, okay. Yeah, I'm gonna turn it over to Shweta really quick so she can introduce all of her dancers, and I'm gonna go try to locate a mic.
Thank you so much, everybody. I'd just like to introduce my sisters, Meera Nayak. Meera Nayak. Shruti Matthew. Shruti Satya. And Priyanka Modi.
All right, I want to take a second to talk about the booth we have in the back corner called Helping Salsa North America. It's a new volunteer startup that started about 4 months ago. And they're different members of the community that come to help people together, help bring people together regardless of religion or race or economic status or nationality to go and work towards different empowerment activities for the community. And they have many different things that you can go and check out back there. They also have fun candy and snacks, so I highly recommend going back there and kind of talking to some of the kids and see what they're all about. All right, next up, we're gonna have a presentation on ancient Indian architecture. Dan and Bhajan went touring temples in India pretty recently, and so they're gonna share their unique experience. But I'm gonna turn it over to Aishwarya really quick first for her poem.
Ancient Indian architecture. At the heart of our program is a visual journey into the aesthetics of India. There will be no music, no drums or saran, no jangle of dance bells. I think the silence of architecture is fitting.
All right. Welcome and thank you for coming to this presentation about select monuments of Karnataka and Maharashtra. I was asked to give this presentation about my experience visiting monuments of India from my own viewpoint, the lens of a Westerner visiting India for the first time, with some context provided by my spouse who grew up in India, and context provided by a few introductory courses on South Asian religion I took in college. This presentation focuses on my interpretations and impressions of the architecture of certain monuments. Neither my spouse Prajwal nor I are subject matter experts on this topic, so this presentation is not intended to be an academic treatise on the monuments that we will show, but rather an overview of some beautiful and awe-inspiring architecture, the details about that architecture that stood out to us, and some basic facts. So we only have time to cover a fraction of the sites we saw and the details we saw there, so I decided to focus on a few specific areas. Temple architecture of Hindu, Buddhist, and Jain temples that we visited. I'm omitting other types of architecture we saw, like palaces, for the sake of having a coherent focus and because of time restrictions. Architectural features that stood out to me, such as how the temples were built, details of the carvings, and recurring features that we saw in the temples. And finally, focused on the awe and wonder that these ancient and majestic structures inspired in us. So we're going to start by looking at the Ajanta cave temples. Here's an exterior view of the entire Ajanta cave temple complex. So these are a set of approximately 30 Buddhist monasteries, or chaitayas, and worship halls, or viharas. These are actually artificial caves carved into the side of a 75 meter or approximately 250 foot rock face at a horseshoe bend in a river. And you can kind of see the river on the right, and then it bends around to the left, but there's a hill obstructing the view on the left a little bit there. Since they are excavated, the temples are entirely part of the same rock. So there are no separate stones used to build these temples. It's just one big rock that's been excavated. They were built over a course of many centuries, starting in the 2nd century BCE and completed around 480 CE. And we were very lucky that the guide we hired was phenomenal, extremely knowledgeable, and very patient in answering all of our questions. And then there's a slightly closer view of the exterior of some of the caves there. Let's take a look inside the caves. Next. Okay. Entering these cave temples, we were engulfed by a sense of majesty and awe. To think that these vast chambers, many of them intricately carved, a few of them delicately painted, were built thousands of years ago was truly inspiring. As an example of how these caves serve as a testament to human achievement, we learned that this detailed artistry was accomplished using a series of mirrors to reflect light from the outside into the caves so that the artisans could see what they were doing. Okay. Let's take a look at some of the different styles of architecture inside the caves. The earliest caves were created by Theravada Buddhists, whereas the later ones were created by Mahayana Buddhists. The Theravada caves didn't have representational statues of the Buddha, but instead featured symbolic statues consisting of geometric shapes. A cylinder topped by a sphere, topped by an ornate box, topped by 3 progressively larger umbrellas. You can see that on the left there. The Mahayana temples included representational statues of the Buddha in an anthropomorphic form rather than geometric shapes. Our guide told us that the traditional image of Buddha was heavily influenced by Greek culture, which had reached India by the time that Mahayana Buddhism came to prominence. In particular, the image of the Buddha was inspired by the Greek images of Apollo, according to what our guide told us. The image on the right here has a Theravada style icon, but with a more ornate base than I think is typical. It's also missing the umbrellas on the top. If I remember correctly, this was originally a Theravada temple that was later converted to a Mahayana temple. Let's take a look at some specific architectural features that caught our attention. So decorative wooden beams from the ceiling on the left of that early temple in the picture on the left rotted away over time, and you can just see the indications that there used to be wooden beams there. But later cave temples, such as the one on the right, had the rock itself actually carved to look like wooden beams. And then the ceilings in other cave temples were actually painted, and you can see 3 different examples there. And then some of the cave temple ceilings were bare rock, which actually brings up the point that some of the caves were started but never fully completed. So each of these 3 columns is in a different stage of completion. This is as far as the artisans who were building this temple actually got in completing it. And here's a side-by-side comparison. Here's a side-by-side comparison of a rough chamber interior with a more finely finished one on the right that's painted with murals. Here's an example of a cave whose walls were covered in murals. You can see those murals on the walls and on the columns. Our guide told us that mineral-based pigments survived to the present day much better than plant-based pigments. Here you can see an older plant-based pigment in the wall between the columns. It's kind of in the center there. And then mineral-based pigments on the columns on the left and the right. All right, so let's move on to the Ellora cave temples. So this next set of photos come from the Ellora caves, which are similar to the Ajanta caves in that they are not natural caves, but rather were carved into the rock by humans. However, for us, they were every bit as magnificent as the Ajanta caves. So the Ellora caves have 3 sections. The oldest are now labeled caves 1 through 12, which are Buddhist caves. Then centuries later, caves 13 through 29 were excavated from the rock, and these are Hindu caves. And then centuries after that was the excavation of the Jain caves, which are now known as caves 30 through 34. So here's an example of some of the Buddhist caves at Ellora. These photos show some similarities to the architectural style at the Ajanta caves that we just saw. Next. These photos show some of the Jain caves at Ellora. When we went to the upper floor of one cave, we first entered a large chamber above the ground floor chamber. We then followed a small passage, thinking that it would lead to an exit down and that would be the end of the upper level. Instead, we were surprised and delighted that through a small doorway, it opened out to another vast chamber. There turned out to be several large chambers in the upper story, connected to each other by comparatively mundane small passageways. Each time we entered another such grand space, it renewed our sense of awe. And then here's another view of the vast Jain chamber from the previous slide. Notice how the column in the foreground on the left has a different style from the ones farther away on the right. There were so many unique details and variations throughout the caves. And here's some views from inside other Jain caves at Ellora. Now in the next slide, this column has a vein of oxidized copper running through it. You can kind of see that, especially on the top left there. So the presence of this vein of copper emphasizes how the people who carved out these temples over 1,000 years ago had to work with the rocks and the minerals that were there. And they exposed details such as this vein of copper during the excavation process. In person, we could see how the vein of copper formed a diagonal plane intersecting the rocks surrounding it. And the plane continued well beyond the column and into the ceiling all the way across the chamber. So here's some pictures of some of the Hindu caves at Ellora. So in the next slide, you can see pictured an abstract representation of the god Shiva, known as a lingam or a Shiva linga. Temples to Shiva had a mix of anthropomorphic statues of the god as well as lingams. And in the next slide, you can see what for us was the most impressive part of the Ellora caves, which was cave number 16, a Hindu temple and the largest one in all of Ellora. However, unlike all of the other caves at Ellora, it actually looked like a freestanding temple in a courtyard surrounded by vertical rock faces. And also, unlike the other caves, which were carved from the side into the cliff face, this one was actually excavated from the top down. Upper floors were carved out and refined before the lower floors. A single narrow gap in the enclosing rock wall provides a passage through which people can enter the courtyard that surrounds the temple. And then in the next slide, you can see a view of Cave 16 from above. And then in the next slide, you can see a view of the temple from the ground level on the left, and then a view inside the temple on the right. So we're next going to switch from looking at temples carved into solid rock to viewing temples that were constructed out of many stones as freestanding structures. Whereas the Ajanta and Ellora are in the Indian state of Maharashtra toward the northwest direction, these next three temples are close to each other in the South Indian state of Karnataka. So in the next slide, you can see pictures of the Adar Smarak Monument, a Jain temple complex in the town of Shravanbelagola. I was trying to practice these names and I think I forgot a little bit. So located here is the Gamateshwara statue, one of the largest statues in the world that is carved from a single stone. So in the photo on the left, you can see part of the stairway that we walked to get up to the statue on the top, but it's actually much longer than what you can see in the photo. It was over 800 stair steps to get from the entrance gate all the way to the Jain temple at the top and the giant statue inside of that temple. So in the next slide, you can see the Hoysaleswarar temple in the town of Halebedu, which was the regional capital of the Hoysala Empire in the 11th century. So this temple is dedicated to the god Shiva, though it also depicts myriad other deities in the stone carvings. So the next image, you can see that the level of detail that went into the temple carvings in the walls. In the photo on the left, you can see that the base of the outer walls were carved in rows of symbols, such as plants and animals that each had symbolic meanings. Elephants for strength, lions for courage, horses for speed, and plants and flowers for beauty. The photo on the right gives a glimpse into the way that each carving on the temple wall is unique. In this image, you can see two of the myriad hairstyles from the era when the temple was built. So there are two figures that was able to fit into that photo, but there were actually dozens of such figures in the walls of this temple, and each of them was unique from every other one. So next, we can see some details of a more violent variety. 3 carvings depicting gods defeating demons. So, next slide. The one on the left depicts an avatar of the god Vishnu in a half-human, half-lion form, and you can see he has a lion head there. If you look near the bottom left of this photo, you can see that he's pulling the skin off the head of one of his defeated enemies, a demon, with the skin and the eyeballs being pulled above his now exposed skull, which is kind of gruesome, but also look at the incredible level of detail carved into stone there. In the center photo, next slide. In the center photo, the lion-human hybrid avatar of Vishnu is pulling the intestines out of a defeated demon king. And then in the photo on the right, a deity holds the severed head of a demon while another demon drinks the blood dripping from its neck. That's that one right there. Okay, next, let's look at the Chanakeshava temple in the town of Belur. So this temple was built in 1117 CE, and construction took 103 years to complete. It's dedicated to the god Vishnu. It has carvings depicting scenes from Hindu stories such as the Ramayana and the Mahabharata, and scenes depicting everyday life during the time period of its construction. The photo on the left shows the entrance to the temple complex. So each of the pillars in this temple was unique from every other pillar. One of the pillars was an index that recreates many of the carvings from the temple's outer walls, but on a smaller scale. And you can see that index pillar in the photo on the right. And we just thought that was really, really cool that they would have an index of highlights from all around the outer walls of the temple. So in the next slide, you can see that the figures carved into the temple wall are all unique. Like the previous examples from the Hoysalwara temple, they each show a different hairstyle from the time period when the temple was constructed. There were dozens more of these figures than what you can see in this photo. Let's look at a temple located in the old city of Hampi, which was the capital of the Vijayanagara Empire in the 14th century. Next. So the photo on the left in this slide shows how inside the temple, a small hole in the wall created a pinhole camera effect, with the shadow of a pyramid-shaped temple gate nearby appearing as an inverted shadow on the wall. And then on the right, you can see the actual temple gate monument, which is casting that shadow. So on the next slide, you can see that one of the temples in the complex is actually built partially underground, with a subterranean carved passageway encircling its exterior. And these photos, these 3 photos here show different vantage points along the subterranean passageway. And then next, there's a carving in the temple wall that's a miniaturized model of the overall temple design. And it reminded progeny of that index pillar we saw a moment ago at Belur. So the final monument that we're going to cover, the Patadakal Monument, is a UNESCO World Heritage Site, as actually are several of the other ones that we covered. So the name roughly translates to coronation place. 96 coronations took place here in the 6th to 8th centuries. And in the interest of time, we're only going to talk about 2 specific carvings here. So the guide here told us that this carving you see now isn't meant to be 3 individuals, but rather the same individual at 3 different positions in a dance. The arms and legs of the center figure also belong to the figures on the left and the right. The concept reminded me of the Cubist technique of representing different angles or perspectives of viewing a person or object and then flattening those into 2-dimensional space. And then in this other carving, you can see an elephant and a bull which actually share the same head. So depending on how one looks at it, the head belongs to the elephant or to the bull. So to summarize the themes that that we saw. We saw the coexistence of Hindu, Jain, and Buddhist temples. We saw stone monoliths, both statues and entire temples carved out of a single stone. We saw temple indexes. We saw exquisite detail. And we had a profound sense of awe that we experienced. Thank you for your time and attention. We hope you learned something that you found interesting and that you get to visit these places someday.
Thank you so much to Dan and to Prajwal. It looks like you guys had a great time, and thank you so much for documenting your experience and sharing it with us. So for our final performance of the day, we are going to head west to the state of Gujarat, incidentally where my family is from. India, as you must have seen so far, is a country of unity with a lot of diversity within it. And this holds true for folk dances as well. And each region and state has its own native type of dance. And one of these gems, and a personal biased favorite of mine, is Gujarati folk dance. It includes mainly Garba and Dandiya. This style is performed at many different celebrations, but especially during the Navdurga festival. Garba is played with your hands and Dandiya is played with sticks and often in a circle. Rupalini Gote and her folk Jhalak dance group have been presenting various Indian folk dances along with Bollywood dances in the Portland community for over 10 years. And in this performance today, we will see Neetu, Priyanka, Meera, Ruchi, Rupali, and Aparna. And I will turn it over to Aishwarya again for her poem.
Folk dance. In my many years of dancing, I've only ever felt clueless while doing Garba. Not in the first few minutes of Garba, but as we flow through the motions again and again and again and again, in the cocoon of my sisters who dance around me, I feel completely and utterly at home, safe, ecstatic. I remember the Natya Shastra, and I wonder why we would ever need rigid structure to be free. If you, like me, are Indian and born in America, at some point, another brown kid will try to connect with you over Bollywood. Well, I'm putting my foot down, and you heard it here first. I crave variation. Like a flower in the desert, I am parched for movements and words and beats that surprise me. We are immigrants and the kids of immigrants. Let us dig deep into the endless bounty that is our heritage and recover what may otherwise fossilize.
Thank you all so much, and what a fabulous way to cap off our performances. I'm going to turn it over to Aishwarya one last time to help her take us through this whole story.
In conclusion, maybe this poem is enough. In all honesty, I am not that religious. I have never felt ecstasy while doing Bharatanatyam or singing Carnatic music. In fact, I never really lived in Oregon. I lived next to Usha Mohan Auntie, and in between Anjali Auntie and Usha Ulas Auntie. My world spanned from Anu Auntie's cul-de-sac in Beaverton to Nandini Auntie's cul-de-sac in Tigard. I have never told these aunties what they mean to me, that they were the new borders my mom drew for us when she crossed Americas. Whatever the art form, Kuchipudi, Hindustani, Carnatic, or folk, for me, it was never about the art at all. It was the borders within which the art could exist.
Thank you so much to Aishwarya for helping guide us through this whole program. That is it for our program today, folks. Thank you so much to all of you for coming out. I want to give a shout out to a couple people, and then I will turn it over to John. I want to give first a huge shout out to Vijay Rao for helping us out with the sound system today, and to Ravi Dutt for providing our sound system today. And then another huge shout out to the man himself, Mr. Anant, who helped put everything together today and helped bring all these people and performers together. Now I'm going to turn it over to John Tepley.
Well, thank you so much for coming out, and thank you, Ananda, for putting this together. And your beautiful daughter, she did an amazing job. Thank you. So this is the International Nearby Mail Festival of Global Art, and it's happening over 4 months. And next week we will be doing Palestine. The week after will be Iran, and every 2 weeks there'll be a different country. And I hope that you will keep an eye out for us and join us for the other events. Thank you.